Okay, I want to just demonstrate some foreshortening related uh, techniques, but also transparent layers, and optical mixing of colors through a wet layer on top of a dry layer, or dry layer on top of a wet layer, then let that dry, and then another layer, and then another layer. But you really, as I've stressed before, you got to be patient and let things dry. Um, this is different than what you guys are doing, but it's just strictly for demonstration's sake. I am working on different stages of the same drawing, but they're technically different drawings, just so you can kind of see more than one thing. So, what I just did here was, well, what I've done with all of them is I started with one color at a time, and then have kind of gone through and added to them and added to them. So, I started with a blue wash first for shortening and depth reasons. I wanted the blue down first. It'll help with darkness up here, but it'll also help with atmospheric distortion, diffusion, perspective, whatever you want to call it, as it goes back. So I started with the blue, then I went through with a red violet, because the warmth, where it's really thin, it'll just have unity, but where it's a little thicker, a little more obvious, it will help with rich darks, but also the warmth will bring the eye forward. Uh, so that's stage one, and stage two are obvious or evident right here with the blue and then the red, or red violet, I should say. Um, Stage three, I go through with the green, and as you see, by the time I get the green layered on to uh, the violet and the blue, it starts to make like a gray or like a metal. It's all very thin layers, with the exception of a couple spots here and there, and that's all going to look kind of weird until I get it, solidified a little bit more. And so then we have this one that has both, and or all three. It has the red, the violet, or red violet, the blue, and the green. But also, I have started to put a little bit of a like a red orange, along with the wood grain marks that were already there, to give even more variance to the wood grain that'll be there. Once that's dry, I can put the handle on. So there's that. Now, just to be thorough, I'm going to kind of go through and show you how, what it looks like when you add the green. Now, it's always going to be hit and miss. As you can see, I've done the same thing, well, two stages of the same thing a couple of times, and I've gotten different results, slightly different results with each one. So you can kind of see them a little bit more together there. A little bit anyway, right? So this one now needs the green, it has the blue, and it has the violet. And again, even though I'm using this watercolor pen, you can do the same approach with the watercolor paints. You take a little bit of water, a little bit of paint, and then put it down, and then you just simply go back and grab more water until you diffuse it the way you want. So what I do, though, because I'm trying to make these all like a progression series so that you guys can see it, I do try to keep them where I can see them as I'm working on them, to try to treat areas similar to each other but not necessarily identical. So I'm gonna go put this core shadow on here, because I know that it can be darker green in a few of these spots than it can be in other areas, and that first batch of the color is always going to be the most saturated. Then we just keep going back with water and thinning it out more. So, but I want to work relatively quickly, because I want to make sure I get it about where I want it and not just where I have to deal with it. And I'm going to leave a little bit untreated there for reflected light. I'm going to pull some of this green from here, so I don't have to redip. And you probably can't even see that very well right there, but eventually it'll all show up. Now I'm going to put a little more in here, just because I think I can. By the time I get more and more layers on here of other colors eventually. I'll probably want that a little richer. And that's probably a little too green. So wipe that off, come back to it, thin it out, spread it out, elongate it down to into there. Take a little bit up there. Let's see what happens with that eventually. Okay, so now I need to, this is my shadow side here and here, obviously, because you can tell by the light source. So I'm going to keep, I'm going to work this way so that I'm not dragging my hand too much through things. And so, again, I usually start where I know I need it dark and thick. Thin it out with some water. So those colors mixing together are what give us the impression that we have a black. And if our edges aren't super clean right now, as long as we let things dry, we can always fix that later. So you gotta let things dry. Notice too that I get in and I get out. I rub back and forth a few times, but not for very long. And so now I'm gonna establish this edge a little bit better here. But then I'm gonna spread it out so it grays up a little bit. So we get like a mixed gray. So this is the same thing as basically making a mixed black. Dark green, dark red, dark blue. The difference is that we're putting it on thinner, which then allows the white of the paper to mix with the quote mixed black, that then makes it basically a gray. Just through thin coats. Now, the thing that we also want to keep in mind is that each layer is going to change it a little bit and make it a little bit more this or that. So we've got to preserve our whites for as long as we can, because once they're gone, it's kind of hard to get them back. We can, and I'll show you how to do that. But a lot of this is not going to look as good until you basically get to the very, very end anyway. And notice too, one of the things that I do is I take the colors and I kind of try to distribute them everywhere where I have the other colors, but I leave little pops of the previous layer here and there. That will really do some good stuff for depth and visual interest and sharpness. And I think you'll see it before long. It can work as reflected color. Okay, that's a little too much there. Oh, you can also use your layers. Each layer that you add, you can use them to help you to basically clean up your edges and stuff too. Or fix, that's what I meant to say, fix things that you didn't get right to begin with. So, whoops, like that would be something I'd have to fix later if I didn't have this paper towel. So, if you have a shape that you missed, you didn't put it down earlier, previously, whatever, you had the shape wrong, whatever the case may be. So I'm stealing this green here, putting it in with this violet. I need a little more, so I'll steal it from somewhere else eventually if I don't have enough here. But all you gotta do is just add colors to things where there weren't any, and you can eventually give the impression that the thing that you messed up wasn't messed up after all. So I'm going to keep working on these shadows here. Again, trying to layer some areas, especially going pretty green in areas where I want to go dark later on. But trying to leave a good amount of the white and leave a good amount of the colors showing through as well. And then make this edge a little crisper. this one too. This is like a viridian green, and it's kind of warmer. But on one of them, I used more of like an evergreen. It's a deeper one, like really deep. So clean up that edge for now. Again, I got more layers. They'll clean things up even more if I want to. So I can let this be a little fuzzy, a little blurry. And getting close, done with the green. Whoop. Except I gotta fix that. That won't be good. I'm gonna quickly spread this out a little bit so I can get back to those areas I messed up. Don't really like that. I'm gonna take it off. I'm using the rag a little bit more tonight. Than I've been doing, but that's all right. Sometimes you have to. A little more green, just a little bit. Okay, a little bit, a little bit. All right, now, last thing now is the cast shadow out here. Did the cast shadow there. Technically, I don't want to go too far, but I know that I can go a lot deeper with my shadows. Eventually, in some spots anyway. Don't want to wet that down too much. I want to keep the paint relatively saturated. Steal some of this. If you keep a wet edge, you can spray this or whatever, or you can just keep going back with water as quickly as you can. If you keep a wet edge, though, it lets you do a lot more for a lot longer, even though you gotta go quick. You can usually get away with more. So there's the there's the green layer, and then I can go through to these other ones and do more of other colors. And so in this case, so I'm going to put that one aside so it dries. And what I'm going to do now on this one is I'm going to go through and I'm going to clean up some of my edges a little bit more with a little more blue this time. So I'm going to use a dark blue and just kind of see what happens. And this is a very dark blue. This is like I believe this is Prussian. It's kind of hard to see it here. Yeah, so this is like a Prussian blue as opposed to cerulean blue and ultramarine blue that I've been using before. And so what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to really try to rely on this for some of my metallic color to start really selling that a little bit more. I'm going to just kind of put it in. And again, I'm not going to try to get exactly where I need to go with it right away because I can do other layers later on as long as I get in and get out and don't overwork the paper on any wet layer. And in this case, while I want to draw attention to some hard edges, I also just straight up want to mix the blue in a little bit more for more of a metallic sensation, deepen the metallic sensation. And for some reason, that pass of the color went way further than the previous ones had been. Which is fine, actually. And as you can see, the head of that hammer is really starting to pop out. Grab a little more brush and kind of distribute it a little bit. Every little pass helps make things darker, but also helps solidify those edges, helps make the light areas look lighter. It just helps sell that metallic finish more. And again, like I said, let's try to leave previous layers showing a little bit. Just a little. Or at least a little anyway. And now, because I'm kind of focusing on the hammer itself, or the metal part of the hammer, I should say. Just a little bit more on this part, or these parts. Yeah, I should probably do a little bit here too. And now I'm gonna jump up into here. Well, actually, I'll go back here, do this handle a little bit, and the cast shadow from the handle, on the handle, I should say. I'm doing the wood grain a little darker as I go, so that I get the so I get wood grain texture showing through and shadow at the same time later on, because it's just easier to do some of it sooner than later, sometimes anyway. And this is more of the green. May not have been dry, but it should be. The edge is crisp though, so maybe it's just the lighting is making it look blue, a little more green. Alright, so I'm going to pull this away so I've really diffused that depth further back while pulling it towards me. And then I'm going to take what's left on the brush. So I don't need to go super washed out with the handle. Depth is depth, but I got other layers to go, so I don't want to do too much to kill it too soon. I don't like that. I'm going to darken this quite a bit here. Couple wood grain marks. This color, again, if you introduce a color and you put it a little bit everywhere, it really just helps with the unity so that everything feels more correct together later on. Alright, so a good amount of the blue here because we're getting really close to the viewer. But I want to leave a little of that red violet showing through. And just keep going. Keep going, keep going, keep going. never be done until you know you're done. Just keep going, plan that you're gonna do a lot more than you end up doing, and you'll be surprised when you're done and feel better about it. Because if you tell yourself you got to be done soon, you're just gonna compromise and not be able to see where you can go with something. Here's what I fixed earlier. I was talking about you can just use color to fix things. So what I did here, I had messed up the ellipse a little bit on this one. And so I just put a thin wash of the green to help fix it. This would go a little faster, a little easier if I was using a bigger brush. But this brush pen is fun. So I use it. Alright, now I'm going to come in and I'm going to put a little more while it's soft, or while it's wet, so it'll have a softer edge. Put a little more blue in here. And a little more blue along here. And again, sometimes, it's good to keep adding a color because you're going to cover it over anyway, or because the softness will help with an effect or whatever. But you don't always want to keep doing that. All right. I'll go back some other day, probably not even for now, and do a little more layering in the dark here. But I want to attack this shadow now, this cast shadow, with a little more of this dark blue. And so I'm going to take a good amount of paint, put it right in there, pull it out a little bit to soften it and spread it out. Steal a little bit from there and there. Again, try to leave some of those layers from earlier, or hints of those layers from earlier peeking through. Remember that reflected light, you don't want to go too dark. You can always go dark, but you just gotta go darker later to cover it up, or not cover it up, but to make the reflected light pop back out. And that's about it for that part. Just a little more shadow up here. Then a layer of it over here that'll really wash out. And there's most of our hammer. Now, last thing I'll do for this demonstration is I will go back to this one. It still needs some of the well, it needs the dark blue still, but that's okay. I'm just going to go ahead and put on some wood grain color, and in this case I'm just going to use like a kind of like a, what is this color? Yellow ochre, and see what happens. And I'm going to start up here because it'll be warmer. Actually, I want some up in here too. And that'll probably have to retreat later on. Gonna kind of pull it from here, pull it on down the handle. and just let it fade out. I can always go back with another coat though too. So if I put it all on a little thicker up at the top, but still pretty saturated as it goes down, if I do another coat and I do a similar approach, more color up here, less color as I go back, that will still really help diffuse it over the duration of the space too. But there's a good start for now. But see, those colors do not pull in. I'm not pulling any of that green into that yellow. It's because I let them dry. This is this stuff with the fringe on it. This is 300 series Strathmore, which means it's the yellow stuff. So you can do some decent stuff with the yellow Strathmore too. It just sometimes if you push it too far, you can't. So anyway, all right, there's, you know, if you put these two together, you got pretty much a finished hammer. And I might do one more video eventually to put them all together, but who knows. So have a great day.